Immigration scams. That's the real reason why truck driver pay rates haven't gone up in North America. Our industry isn't short on drivers, it's overloaded with them. But the problem isn't how many drivers we have, it's how they're getting here and what's happening once they arrive. In this video, we're going to talk about how thousands of people are entering Canada through immigration loopholes, how fake schools and false job offers are taking advantage of the system, and how this flood of unqualified drivers is keeping wages down and hurting legitimate carriers and drivers like yourselves. We're gonna go through 4 of the most common scams right now: the Asylum Seeker scam, the visitor visa scam, the fake student permits, and the fraudulent LMIA job offers. And then I'll show you what's happening right after they come here to Canada with truck driving schools that have already been caught and shut down. Because if you've been wondering why rates are falling, why insurance is climbing, and why so many new drivers seem unprepared, this is why. It's not a shortage, it's an oversupply, but on scams and loopholes. Let's get into it. Number 1, we're going to talk about the asylum and refugee claims and how this is hurting our industry. This one's becoming the most abused backdoor into our industry. People are being coached overseas to enter Canada and immediately file an asylum claim. Not because they're fleeing war or prosecution, because it gives them temporary work rights while their case is being processed. And that process can take years. On average, 2 to 4 years, sometimes even longer if the claim is appealed. During that time, claimants and often their families are entitled to health care, monthly assistance, free schooling for their kids, and after just a few months, a valid work permit that lets them work almost anywhere, including trucking. So what happens? They enroll in a shady truck driving school, get a commercial driver's license within 3 to 5 weeks, with no prior experience, and immediately start working. And from that point on, they can legally work for 2 to 4 years while their asylum case is being reviewed. Isn't that absurd? We're putting untrained, inexperienced drivers behind the wheel of 80,000-pound trucks, not because they're qualified, but because the system allows it. The result? Thousands of unqualified drivers on the roads, lowering professional standards and flooding the job market with cheap labor. And now the Driver Inc. problem shows up. People obtain a commercial license within 3 to 5 weeks, set up a corporation within minutes, and operate in a misclassified contractor setup, a structure that has often resulted in avoiding payroll taxes, missed contribution to social programs, and less accountability to safety and employment standards. And now to the second problem, the visitor visas. Recruiters tell people overseas, get a visitor visa, fly to Canada, and we'll convert it into a work permit once you arrive. Sounds simple, but it's a lie. These visitors arrive expecting jobs that don't exist. The recruiter then introduces them to a carrier who pretends to employ them on paper or make them work illegally under the table. Many of these workers end up living in unsafe housing, earning less than the minimum wage, and working long hours without any rights, just so they can stay here in Canada. And when you have a wave of desperate drivers who will accept any pay just to survive, it's impossible for legitimate drivers to negotiate fair rates. And now the Driver Inc. pattern appears. New arrivals get licensed within 3 to 5 weeks, get incorporated within minutes, and work as contractors, a misclassification that often leads to tax avoidance, lack of CPP/EI contributions, and weaker protections for the worker and for the road safety. Scam number 3, the fake student visas. Another common entry point is through fake student visas. People are told to enroll in private colleges that claim to offer trucking or logistics programs. These schools often exist only on paper, a rented office space, or a single classroom. Recruiters say once you land in Canada, you can drive trucks while studying. But in reality, most of these students never go to class. They drop out and start working under the table or through small carriers who look the other way. They skip proper commercial training and jump straight into driving long haul with no previous experience from back home and no experience with Canadian weather, highways, or safety standards. This is how we end up with thousands of unqualified drivers holding legitimate Class 1 license, all because the system doesn't verify the legitimacy of these schools or programs. And now the driver Inc. dynamics is widespread. People obtain licenses within 3 to 5 weeks, incorporate within minutes, and operate as misclassified contractors, a setup that often reduces taxes and benefit contributions and shield bad actors from accountability. And now scam number 4, the fake LMIA job offers, which happens all across Canada. The LMIA job offer scams doesn't just come from overseas recruiters. It often starts right here in Canada. Many of these LMIAs are being issued by trucking companies that should never be approved to bring in foreign drivers in the first place. There's no on-site investigations when companies are getting approved, no check on their insurance coverage, there's absolutely no look into their safety rating, and in most cases, no one verifies how these drivers are being paid. The system simply rubber stamps the application. And here's the worst part. Some carriers themselves are selling LMIAs, charging newcomers anywhere from $20,000 to $35,000 per offer. These companies pocket the money, bring in the driver on paper, and then pay them next to nothing once they arrive, or force them into unsafe, under-the-table arrangements. It's become a business model, not a labor program. And once again, it feeds directly into the driver Inc. cycle. Drivers gets their commercial driver's license, opens a corporation within minutes, and operates under contractor setups and avoids payroll taxes. They don't contribute to CPP or EI and weaken accountability across the entire industry. All right, so now we know how they get into the country, but what's next? Now we've seen how some people fraudulently arrive in Canada, but what happens after they're here? Well, let's look at what some of them do next and what's been happening right here at home in Canada. Let me bring up a few real stories that have made headlines in the last few years. Truck driving schools, fraud closures, and unsafe practices. Stories that have made headlines in the last few years. Across Canada, several truck driving schools have been caught committing fraud, issuing fake training certificates, falsifying test results, and cutting corners on safety. In Ontario, 2 operators, Gurvinder Singh and Gurpreet Singh, were convicted after running unregistered schools that issued false mandatory entry-level training certificates and charged students up to $5,000 each. They provided no proper instructions, only fake paperwork. In Alberta, regulations shut down 5 driver training schools and 13 trucking companies after discovering widespread non-compliance, including unqualified instructors and falsified training records. The province revoked licenses and issued fines over $100,000. Other provinces have reported cash for license schemes where students paid extra, skip the training process, and get rushed road tests. Investigations by Ontario Ministry of Transportation have led to multiple suspensions and flagged dishonest examiners. These operations all have one thing in common. They target new immigrants who don't know the rules. They promise fast results, take their money, and put them behind the wheel without proper training. The result? Unprepared drivers on the road, rising insurance costs, and legitimate schools struggling to compete with fraud. These immigration and training scams have completely changed the face of trucking in Canada. They've turned a respected trade into a revolving door of desperate workers, low pay, and unsafe practices. Until our government starts verifying every LMIA, every driving school, and every training certificate, nothing will change. The problem isn't a lack of drivers. The problem is a flood of unqualified ones. We don't need more bodies and seats. We need qualified, properly trained, and fairly paid drivers to bring integrity back to this industry. I'd love to hear some of your comments and thoughts. Please put a comment down below. I'm Ronen, and I'll catch you in my next video.